Democracy Now! Had Noam Chomsky and Harry Belafonte do a talk together. This was at some anniversary event, and Noam had some wise words about Bernie Sanders' movement and the future.
And if you look at the younger voters, the people who will shape the future, they were overwhelmingly anti-Trump and even more overwhelmingly pro-Sanders. That's an we should also bear in mind what a remarkable phenomenon the Sanders campaign was. I mean, here's somebody unknown, came from nowhere. Practically no one in the country knew who he was. He was using words like socialism, which used to be a real curse word. No corporate support, no media support, no support from the wealthy. Everything that has always been crucial to winning elections, mostly we have bought elections, had none of it, and practically took over one of the two major parties. It could have taken it over if it hadn't been for shenanigans you know about. And it was primarily driven by young people. All of these are very hopeful signs. It means there are plenty of things that can be done. There are opportunities that can be grasped. No time to run through them, but there are plenty of them. And it's really very much in our hands and among the younger of you in your hands to carry us forward in this long, arduous path towards trying to create a civilized society and a decent world.
I recommend checking out that whole talk on Democracy Now! It really is an enlightening conversation. There are two things there to break down. Number one is the establishment is having trouble keeping the lid on us at this point. So that's a positive sign. The negative sign is the Democratic Party is completely and utterly broken. So it's amazing. You have this rise among millennials, among independents, among the people, this tide of populism and progressivism. But you have the party that's supposed to be most open to that, and the party that's supposed to be driven by that, they're tone deaf, and they don't hear it, and they keep going in the Hillary Clinton direction. They keep going in the Obama direction. They keep going in the direction of the establishment, corporatist, centrist Democrats. And the good news that Chomsky is sharing is the wave cannot be stopped. And now it's going to require a lot of hard work. It's going to require a lot of effort, a lot of sweat, a lot of protests, a lot of organization. It's going to have to be a gigantic movement. And yes, we all have to dot the I's and cross the T's. But in terms of what the American people feel, what they believe, what millennials feel and believe, what independents feel and believe, the direction of the country, in terms of the mood, there is no question. I mean, you look at the opinion polls, and the people are overwhelmingly liberal. And I go as far, they're not even center left. They're just left. So you name the issue, I'll show you how they are indeed on the left. There's only, if I'm not mistaken, there's only one major issue where they are not, and that would be the death penalty. The death penalty, they still lean in a conservative direction. But virtually every other issue. So you talk about war, only 17% of the American people still want to be involved in these wars. The war in Afghanistan right now is more unpopular than the war in Vietnam was at its most unpopular point. A majority of the American people say, let's tax the rich more. A majority say, don't cut education, don't cut Social Security, don't cut Medicare under any circumstance. 80% say raise the minimum wage. Again, you name the issue, I will show you. Over 50% want a single-payer universal healthcare system. So there's not an open question in terms of the feelings of the American people. How do we harness those feelings and move forward and get the positive change that we need, though? And what Chomsky's pointing out there is there was almost a complete and utter collapse of the establishment in this election. You got a guy like Bernie Sanders, a senator from Vermont. Vermont has a grand total of -8 people, but he's somebody that only political junkies knew of. But here's a guy, really old guy. He's a Jewish, maybe atheist, democratic socialist. He's got bad posture. He's never said a political thing or been a polished politician in his entire life. He just goes out there and shoots from the hip and speaks from the heart and talks about policy. And this guy was a one-man wrecking ball through the establishment. He went from having no name recognition to getting 47% of the vote against somebody who was already an A-list celebrity when she launched her campaign. The mainstream media was waiting, oh, Hillary, oh, we love Hillary, everybody loves Hillary, Hillary's the anointed one, Hillary's the one that's going to do it, and there's no question. And this guy came along and won 22 states in the primary. 22 states, 47% of the vote. When the media was biased against him, all the corporate money was biased against him, the DNC was biased against him, trying to hide debate so that nobody sees him and nobody hears his message, and, cutting voting times in certain states and pushing for closed primaries instead of open primaries, because when you open them, then independents vote and millennials turn out and he wins. Everything was biased against him, and he almost won. So the establishment is having a hard time keeping the lid on us. How much longer can they keep that up? Now, the only downside to this conversation is there's a race going on. The race is between right-wing populism and left-wing populism. Right-wing populist is Donald Trump. Now, he portrayed himself that way. In fact, when he governs, he might govern as the most establishment candidate in human history, judging by his appointments. But either that or he's an authoritarian wild card and a buffoon, and I think it's actually going to be a mix of both of those things. But he campaigned as a right-wing populist. So right-wing populists don't even necessarily disagree with liberals on economic policy, because when you prod deep enough, they're not, free market ideologues. So in other words, that's why Trump's anti-NAFTA, anti-TPP talk resonated with these people. But they have somewhat liberal economic positions mixed with what? Deep, deep bigotry and xenophobia. So you have bigotry, xenophobia, policies that they support, like deporting all undocumented immigrants, banning all Muslims from coming to the country, doing nationwide stop and frisk, which has a failure rate of well over 90% and disproportionately targets minority communities and takes away their Fourth Amendment rights. So you have one candidate who campaigned more populist, but who's massively xenophobic, bigoted, and authoritarian, where he's kind of openly against civil liberties and the First Amendment. And then you had one candidate who was a civil libertarian, was not authoritarian, and was liberal, was progressive on economic policy, was a democratic socialist. Unfortunately, it worked out that the right-winger ended up winning the election, but the movement must not die. And remember, every time you feel isolated and alone, that's how the establishment wants you to feel. But remember, the opinion polls are with you. So it's just a matter of harnessing that energy and organizing it and fighting until we win. And right now it might feel like, well, we're never going to win, because look at what's going on. You got the Republicans in the House of Representatives, the Republicans in the Senate, the Republicans have the presidency, they have the majority of state legislatures and governorships. Yes, the outlook is grim in terms of the government right now, but the sentiment among the people is not grim. The sentiment among the people is, we're fed up with this shit, we're tired of this shit. And so it's time for that progressive wave to take over. And that's what Chomsky's referring to. And now it's on us to do the hard work and dot the I's and cross the T's. And he goes on to talk about that further there. So it's on us, as President Obama once said, which is funny because it turns out he wasn't part of this, but you are the change you're waiting for. I'm paraphrasing there, but that is true. You don't have to sit around and say, I can't wait for this thing to come around or that thing to come around in order to make it better and we can latch on to somebody. No, bitch. You can do it yourself. We can all rise up together. We can all do our part. We can all protest. We can all organize at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. We can run progressive candidates. We can have everybody take a pledge. We don't take corporate money, bitch. We take money from the people, and we're going to represent the people. We can have people stand up and say, you know who I believe in? The American people. Look at the polls. That's what I'm going to implement. I'm not going to listen to some corporation in a backroom deal. I'm going to listen to the people, and I'm going to, these numbers are my Bible. This is my gospel. 80% of the American people want the minimum wage. I'm here to represent you. Let's go. Let's go do it. So this is where we have to go from here.